Good morning, folks. So today we're going to model the skill of close reading, which is very important in history because reading historical documents and speeches is kind of tricky. So it's important to look at a primary source and evaluate what's being said, what's the language that the author is using, and how does the language relate to the person's perspective. How do we situate this source within our understanding of a historical timeline? So today our central historical question is, what were the competing visions of Mexican revolutionary leaders? So today we're going to focus specifically on one leader, which is Francisco Madero. So document A is the plan of San Luis Potosí. So we're not going to do specific sourcing analysis, but I'm just going to go ahead and read our source. So excerpts from a proclamation by Francisco Madero on October 5th, 1910. I'll just highlight this real quick because this is the date, and our author is Francisco Madero. So during the 1910 presidential elections, Madero was arrested for daring to challenge Mexico's long-standing ruler, Porfirio Diaz. Madero escaped from prison and fled to San Antonio, Texas, where he proclaimed the plan of San Luis Potosí. So he did this from Texas after being exiled. So in this plan, he is declaring the 1910 elections illegal and calling for an armed rebellion against the federal government. So the plan of San Luis Potosí, proclamation of the Mexican army. We know that from our footnote, this is specific to the Mexican army. It's part of a larger work. So to the Mexican army, fellow citizens, this is his audience, is the Mexican army. The long dictatorship of Porfirio Diaz has resulted in the false belief that our people are weak and cowardly, and you who wear the uniform have also been slandered, considered as the scourge of the people, and as the supporters of the dictator. So I'm going to highlight our people. That refers to the Mexican people, and he is concerned about their reputation. He's saying that people hate the army, basically. So, all right. The day of freedom has arrived on the 20th of the next month. All of the people and a larger part of the army will arise in arms. I'm going to highlight arise in arms to overthrow the government of General Diaz. So this would be November 20th because this proclamation is from October 5th. So, and what is he doing here? He is announcing the date of the coup, which, as we know, is overthrowing a government by force. All right, so the triumph of the revolution is certain, but with you it rests whether it shall be quickly or slowly gained, whether there shall be a greater or a less degree of bloodshed, whether you yourselves will gain for us more quickly our liberty, for it is well known that you are those who suffer the most from the dictatorship. So I'm going to highlight those that suffer the most from the dictatorship are the soldiers, and from these sentences I get a sense of great urgency for winning the battle against Diaz. So, soldiers suffer the most from the dictatorship. You soldiers are drafted into military service. Drafted, as we saw, was one of our vocab words. It means that soldiers are inscribed into military service. Okay, so you officers and chiefs find yourselves constantly kept down, for under an autocracy such as ours, merit is always placed below influence, and in order to rise in the army, it is necessary to know more of the handling of the incense cup than that of the sword. So I'm just going to underline handling of the incense cup than that of the sword. And that is a metaphor. It says that getting promoted in the army has to do with who you know rather than merit. So I invite all the soldiers and all the chiefs and officers, I'm going to underline chiefs and officers, to unite with us in this movement. In this manner, will you disprove the lie that you soldiers are the enemy of the people, and you will prove that belonging to the Mexican army means you are a child of the people, the defender of the institutions, and the incarnation of its patriotic glory. Okay, so basically, before he was talking about soldiers, now he's mentioning the higher ranks, and he's saying that by joining Madero, the army will not be hated, but they will have glory. So the mission of the army is to defend the institutions and not to impose tyranny. So tyranny was also one of our vocab words, talking about an oppressive government. Either you will continue to support the tyrannical General Diaz, or you will join me, complying faithfully And right here, I'm just going to say that, Madero shows his view of what the army should be like in Mexico after Diaz. And he's saying that he's describing what the mission of the army should be, which is to defend the institutions. Okay, so complying faithfully, my political program will most certainly obtain peace and happiness for our country, and through the Constitution, through liberty and justice, we will carry Mexico to the high place which she deserves among the civilized nations. And just one note about this, and that it really flows a lot like on a run-on sentence, and it's kind of like his writing style. So I'm going to underline his political program, and all of this is really just very positive. It's a very positive statement. And Madero wants a constitution, I'll underline that, which would probably provide a lot of order after overthrowing Diaz. Okay, so soldiers, even though I was never in the army, I admire your virtues, and I will know how to put into practice the example of our military heroes who gave us our independence and liberty. So he says the army can be glorious like Hidalgo, which he learned about in the Wars of Independence. So kind of like the founding fathers of Mexico. Like them, I know how to fight bravely, and finally I shall know how to die a glorious death, defending the institutions of a republic. So I'm going to highlight this because it's kind of symbolic that he says that he would die for his country. Remember that General Diaz has dishonored your flag, symbol of our country and symbol of military honor, causing it to be the symbol of tyranny and the symbol of oppression of our people. He has forced you to assassinate innocent civilians in Veracruz, Orizaba, Valladolid, Tlaxcala, and so many other parts of this republic. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this whole sentence right here, and it's significant because it's saying that the Mexican army has committed massacres in these places. Okay, take as your example the brilliant attitude of the Portuguese army, which, working faithfully with the people, was able to overthrow monarchy and to substitute for it a glorious Republican regime. I'll underline Republican regime, and he's saying that that's kind of what he wants for Mexico. The last part is this, and we take note because it is purposely in all caps, which shows that Madero really wanted to focus on this. So, effective suffrage, no re-election. Effective suffrage means to have a real election. And no re-election. You see, I'm thinking about how Diaz has been in power for decades, so he, maybe like no dictators. And it's signed by Francisco Madero. All right, folks, so to summarize, we see this as a plan to the army, and according to our essential question, what was Madero's vision for Mexico? So I'm going to highlight 5 important aspects of this plan. So first, he announces the date of the coup on November 20th, which later we can see that's the date of the actual start of the Mexican Revolution according to our timeline. And second, he announces the reasons to join him. And third, he says that the mission of the army is to protect institutions. A fourth important point from this is that he mentions specific massacres on the part of the Mexican army, and he highlights these. So, for instance, we can go ahead and do research on the massacres in Veracruz on the part of Diaz's forces, for instance. And lastly, I want to take a note of this. His banner of effective suffrage and no re-election is kind of simply stated, yet he doesn't really talk about how he will actually transform the Mexican government. All right, folks, so next we're going to read document D, a similar document from another Mexican revolutionary leader.